Okay, so now that we've seen a little bit of classes, let's take a closer look at some of them and deal with a good practical example. So what we're going to do in this video or in this tutorial section is that we're going to create a class or a class for general pets, and we're going to give them some general properties. And then later on, we'll go on to make inheritance classes, so we can make a dog and a cat, for example, and we'll also do some interaction with them. But let's just start off with the basics, and let's just start off making a general class for a pet. And so this pet would just have all the kind of general properties that all pets would have, or at least some of them. So the ones that we would be interested in, or the ones that we would want to use. So to make a class, we'll just use the keyword class at first. So this is going to define us our class. And then we'll make a space, and we'll put in the class name here, which in this case is going to be pets. Or we can have it be a pet like this. And then we'll put in a colon here. And this is just going to start our class. So now we've got our class definition here. Okay, so let's go on. And the first thing that we need is an initializer. So as soon as the class gets called, we need to assign it certain values. So like we need to kind of build it up. We need to allocate all the properties. We need to assign memory and all that stuff. So if we want to create a pet, we need to initialize it. So we need to kind of create it. And so for this, we need the initializer. And since the initializer is a function that you have to overwrite, you actually have to do the double underscore. And then you write init, and then another double underscore, and then you open and close the parentheses. And afterwards, you put in here a colon. So this is going to indicate that you're going to start your initializer here. And so we're inside the class pets here, and this is going to be our initializer. And we remember we need this double underscore here because the init function already exists kind of inside of Python. So this double underscore lets us overwrite it so that we can redefine it. And this will automatically get called once a pet is created. So because this already exists, this is also automatically going to get called when a pet is created. And so that kind of takes care of itself. And now we remember inside of a class, we need to put, well, the first thing that we want to do is when we create like a function or something, is that we need to put inside self so that it refers to itself. And then we can start putting in the variables. So our first input here is always going to be the self. And let's just think first of some variables that we want to put in. And then we can kind of put them in as input in the top here. So some variables that we may want to create would be a name, for example. So every pet is going to have a name. So to assign the name to the pet class, we actually have to do self.name. And so now this makes name a property of the pet. Because we have the self here. So the self makes name a property of the pet. And we have this dot here because it's acting on itself, and we're giving it, or we're creating the variable name. And so this is one of the, and we'll define these in a second, but let's just kind of write them down first. So this will be the first variable name that we're going to have. The second variable is let's give every pet an age too. So we'll create the second variable self.age. Like this. And then every pet is going to have a hunger level. So they're either going to be hungry or not hungry. And so we'll create a self.hunger. So these are all properties of the pet. So hunger is a property of the pet, age is a property of the pet, name is a property of the pet. And the last thing that we can do maybe is just set a playful. So are they playful or not? So like a kind of true or false. So we can do self.playful. So these are the variables that we want to deal with. And we want to initialize them from input so that we want, when the class is created, we want these variables to be given in by the user or by the program. And then we'll create the pet accordingly. So we need to have the inputs up here. So we can start putting in our input variables here, and we can put in our name variable, or we'll just do shorthand, and our first input we're going to save an n, and that's going to be our name later. Our second input is going to be the age, which we'll do A. Our third input is going to be the H, which is for hunger, and our last input is going to be the P for playful. Now, you may remember, or you may see that this is very, very similar to functions. So we just have all the input that goes into functions here. That's all inside of these brackets for the initializer. And so now we can assign these values by making the self.name property equal to n, and we can make the self.age equal to A, and the self.hunger equal to H, and the self.playful equal to P. Now I used NA, H, and P for the name, age, hunger, and playful up here, just so that it doesn't cause any confusion, but usually what you can also do, or what's usually done, is you even just write name up here, and then you can write name down here. I just didn't do that right now because I don't want you to assume that you have to have this variable name up here. So that's not the case, but it's often done just for convenience because it applies. So maybe we can leave the name here so that we can see both options. We can use name, and then we can assign the name of the pet to be the name that we put into the function, or into the initializer. But we can also use other variable names like A, which is going to be short for age, or H, which is going to be short for hunger, or P, which is going to be short for playful. So we can really just kind of choose our variable names, but very often this is done just for convenience because it makes sense that this variable is called the name and that we save the name in the name. Yeah, so this is our initializer. Now, what we can do afterwards is we can create a get function. So let's go on with that. And what we're going to do with a get function is we're going to, it's going to give us the properties. And something that we forgot by the initializer is because it's a function, we have to actually put def in front of it. So now it's going to give us this bold text and everything. So since it's a function, we have to actually define it with the def keyword. And now this is the function kind of syntax that we know. Okay, but yeah, so now we can move on to defining other functions. And very common functions that you define are something called setters and getters. Now, setters are functions that take in a variable and they set a variable. So we'll see an example of that in a second. And getters are just functions that return a variable. So let's just define a simple getter so that we kind of have a bit more practical understanding of what a getter actually is. So we can add a comment here and just write getters, and everything below here is just going to be a get function. So let's define the get function for name. So we'll write the keyword def and then get name, and then we'll open and close the parentheses. And the only input that we're going to have here is going to be the self. So there's not actually going to be any input, but we need the self here because we're referring to the class. And then we have the colon here. And so all this get name is going to do is it's just going to return the name. So what it's going to do is literally it's just going to return the self.name like this. So this is this is pretty much what a get function is. A get function just gives you the value back. So you can get the name by just doing pet.getName. So this is the example of a get function. Then we can do a set function. So we can do a setter here, and a set function, very similar, kind of the opposite of a get function, is that it's also a function. So we start off with the keyword def, and then we write now set name and open and close parentheses because it's just like a function, and then we put in self first because we're inside of the class, and then the comma separator, and then what we're going to put in here is we're just going to put in a name, and then we put in the colon because it's a function definition. And what we're going to do inside here is we're going to change the self.name to be equal to the name that we put in here. And now you shouldn't confuse that, like, this name here is not equal to this name. It's just the way we call the variables. So we could even call this x, and we could call this x, or we can call it x name, maybe an x name, just to really show that the variable namings don't have to be of a specific type. Like this name here doesn't have to be equal to this name. This name here doesn't have to be equal to this name. If this name and this name is equal, that doesn't mean these two are the same. This is just a function parameter, and it's only defined locally. If you remember from earlier how variables are kind of given a scope. So this variable inside the function, that's a function parameter, only exists inside of this function. So we don't have to worry about it outside. But yeah, let's just leave it as x name just to kind of avoid confusion. But generally, you would also just write name here because it's because that's the best variable name because it applies, because it really is the name. So it's usually just write name here because it fits. But let's just, to avoid confusion, use x name here so that we can see kind of the different ways of naming the variables and really notice that it's pretty much not important what you call your variable. Okay, so this is an example of a get method. This is an example of a set method. We can define the get methods for the other ones too now, so we can do a define, and now we can define the get age, and then we open and close parentheses, and inside here we put again the self, because we're acting on the self, and then the colon here, and here we just want to return the self.age. So our get age is just going to return the self.age. We always need the self variable inside of the brackets because it's part of the function, and it needs to be able to refer to itself, so we need to put the self in here. Now we can do the same thing for the hunger, so def get hunger, and then we put inside here, you open and close the brackets and put a self here, and then we put a colon, and then in here we're just going to return the self.hunger, like this. And then finally, we can also define a get playful. And then we open and close brackets here and put in a self and a colon, and then we return the self.playful, like this. So these are all our get methods. Now we can also do our set methods, and we can define a set age. And now as input we take a self, but we also need to take in the new age that the user is going to put in, or that the program is going to put in. So our next variable name, we'll call it, let's call it age with a capital A, just because, so that these variable names aren't the same. But it can also be with a lowercase, it doesn't matter. And then here in the set age, we'll just set the self.age to be equal to the age. And then we can define a set hunger, def set hunger, and here we open and close again, parentheses, the def keyword again because we're defining a function, and then you guessed it, we put in the self, and here let's actually just use the same variable name, let's just use hunger, like this. And I'm just using all these different cases just to show you it really doesn't matter what you put here as this variable name. This is really just for your convenience. And so here we'll make the self.hunger be equal to the hunger. And finally, we can define a set playful. And here we open and close the parentheses, and we put in self. And here we put in, well, let's call this variable play, like this. So, and in the set playful, it's going to take in a variable called play, and we're going to set the self.playful, so this playful property of the class, to be equal to the variable or the input that we put in here. So what are we doing, or what have we done? We have created a class, or we've defined a class, a general class that we can use. We've created an initializer. And so what this initializer does is it initializes everything. It kind of sets everything. And so we assign, so these are all going to be user inputs, or these are going to be program inputs, the name, the age, the hunger, and the playfulness. And then we're going to set the name and age and hunger and playfulness of the class. So the self dot actually means that it's a property of the class. So the name, the age, the hunger, and the playful belong to the class pet because we have the self dot in front of it. And now what we do here is we just return the name of the pet, we return the age of the pet, the hunger of the pet, and the playfulness of the pet. And here we set the name of the pet by user input, so this is going to work just like a function, and we'll put in a parameter here, and that's going to change the name. This parameter here is going to change the age, This parameter here is going to change the hunger, and this parameter here is going to change the playfulness. So yeah, let's just create a simple pet, and we can call or we can save the pet in the variable called, let's just call it pet1. So this is just going to be a general pet1, and it's going to be equal to, and now we actually want to create a pet of the pet class. So what we do is, since our class is called pet, so we type in the keyword pet, and now we open and close parentheses, and now we see we need to put in, so for the initializer, we never have to put in a self. We have to put in a name, an age, a hunger, and a playfulness. So the name, we can call them Jim, maybe capital J here. The age, we can have them be, well, let's use integers, so we can have them be 3 years old. The hunger is going to be false right now, capital false, and the playfulness is going to be true. So you can see we can also put in all types of different variables here, and yeah, we can just use all that. So we're not restricting ourselves to anything just because these are general Python variables. So we can have a general name, general age, it can be integer, it can also be a string, it can also be something else, it can be a float or whatever you like, and we'll just use Boolean values for the hunger and playfulness. So yeah, so now we've created this pet1, and maybe let's just print some properties and then we can run it. So let's print first pet1 dot, and then let's just get the name, get name, like this. Okay, so let's just run this first to see what we get. And so when we run it, we see this created, so pet1 is now a pet, and what we've done here is we've looked at pet1, and the dot indicates that we go inside pet1, or inside the pet class, and we call the function, or rather the method, which is, method is a function that belongs to a class, we call the method getName. And what getName does is it returns the name of the pet. In this case, the name of the pet is Jim. And so we see Jim here. Now the next thing on the next line, we could maybe print from pet1, let's get playful, like this. And so we open and close parentheses. We always have to open and close the parentheses here because we're calling a function, like this. So the get playful is a function, or it's a method. So we still have to open and close the parentheses, and the dot indicates that it's going to be, that it's part of the pet class. So let's run this, and we see we get Jim as the get name, and we get pet1 as the get playful. And now let's maybe set the name to something else. So pet1 dot set name, and now in here we can type in a new name. So let's rename our pet from Jim to Snowball. So let's give it a more pet-like name. And then let's just get the name of pet1 again. So we can print, and then from pet1, we access the method getName, and we open and close the parentheses. So what we've done here is inside of pet1, we got the method, or we accessed the method setName, and we put in the name here, or the X name. And you notice we don't have to put in the self, we only have to put in the variables here. So in this case, we put in the string snowball. And what that's going to do is, onto pet1, it's going to change the name of pet1 to be the new name that we put in here. And so when we get this new name and when we print it, we can see that first we start off with the name Jim, and who is playful, and then we change the name, and now we get the new name and we get Snowball. So generally these functions are kind of redundant in Python, because in Python something else that I can do is just I can print and I can access the names directly. So for example, in pet1, I can just access the age as we see here, or the name. So I can also do just pet1.name. So I don't actually have to do a get here. I don't have to do a get name really because I can just access it. So if we just run it, we see that the get name function, or the method that I call, returns the name of the pet. In this case, it's Snowball because we changed it. But I can also just access the name directly. And because I can also just access the name directly, I can also change it directly. So if I go into pet1 and I go into the name, and I can just here make it be equal to, well, let's just make it Jim again. So we're changing it from Jim to Snowball, and from Snowball we're changing it back to Jim. And then here we can print out again pet1 dot get, or well, we can actually just use the name like this. So we can print out the name again, and let's run this one more time. So we see is first we print out the name Jim from get name, then we print out true from get playful, so we return the playfulness. Then we change the name to Snowball, so we use the set name, which does this. Here it sets the name of the pet to be equal to the new name. Then we print the new name using the get name method, so we print Snowball. Then we print the name just accessing the name variable, or the name property of the pet, and we also get Snowball. And now we just access the name of the pet1 directly, and we change it back to Jim. And now we also just print the name directly without using any methods, so we get Jim again here. So we can see that in Python, it's not that big of a deal to put in get and sets, because I can access the names directly, or the properties directly. There are ways that you can make them private so that you can't do this, which may be a nice way to do. For example, if you don't want someone to have direct access to the properties, if you want to have them like protected so that, or have them be private so that people can access them directly. But generally you can just access these properties like this. But the point is also to show you the way that we can kind of use input here in functions. So just because we have a self here, we never actually put the self here or anything. We only start with the actual variables. And so this is how we would call a function of a general class. And we see the same thing up here. And so this is just kind of a general example just to get us into it. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to expand upon this a little bit. So instead of just having a general pet, we'll make a subclass of it. So we'll do some class inheritance. And from there, we're going to make dogs and cats, which are also going to be pets, but which are going to have more features of their own.